Hello and welcome back to Crochet Masterclass. This is video 3. So we're going to touch on some things that we didn't talk about in the first 2 videos. First and foremost, we're going to go over some of the items that you are going to need as a beginner. So of course you're going to need your crochet hook. Don't go out and buy you a super expensive crochet hook set. Stick with the basic crochet hook sets for now, because you might find later on that you're not going to like it, or you're just not having as much fun as you thought you were. So yeah, I would definitely stick with the basic set. As you can see here, this is one of the basic hooks, and it is by the brand Boy. And yeah, you can pick up one of these sets at Walmart for about $10, and it comes with a range of crochet hooks. So all the hooks that you're going to need for a bunch of different projects are all in there in that one package for about $10. So the other version of the basic set of hooks is the inline hooks by Susan Bates. And as you can see here, we discussed this in the first video, but these are just 2 different styles of hooks. And it is the same thing with this one. These are a little bit more expensive, just a little bit, but you can pick up a set of these for around $10, and it comes with a bunch of different sizes. You're also going to need a set of scissors. Now, they don't have to be anything fancy. You could even just use nail clippers to clip your yarn if that's all you have. So remember, it doesn't have to be super fancy. It doesn't have to be, you know, unless you want to get a pretty set of scissors, go ahead and do that. But you don't need to spend $50 on scissors or $50 on a crochet hook, by no means. So another thing that you're definitely going to need is tapestry needles or yarn needles, or just needles that have these big eyes, so that way you can weave in your ends. I got this here at Walmart for about $3, and it came with, I do believe, 4. And you might even find them cheaper if you look in the sewing section at Walmart. They sometimes have these for about $1 for 4. So you just got to go look. Don't go out and spend more than that for sure. So some other things that you're going to need as a beginner are just some simple stitch markers. So my favorite are these types of stitch markers here. These are locking stitch markers. So it just locks like that. Looks like a little lock. And these are perfect whenever you're working in the round and you have to mark that first stitch. These are actually ones that I 3D printed, and they're not my favorite. I really don't like these types of loop stitch markers because they tend to fall off, especially if you like to move your hands a lot whenever you're working. But yeah, you don't even need to buy these if you don't want to. You can just use a scrap piece of yarn as a stitch marker, and you just use that. I'll go over alternatives to certain things as we progress in our journey and we start working some patterns. So this is just the very basic things that you're going to need. And of course, you're going to need your hands. So let's move on. So now we're going to move on to holding your hook. So there are 2 different types of ways to hold your crochet hook. The first grip is the knife grip. The knife grip is exactly the way it sounds. You're going to grip your crochet hook the way you would a knife, like when you're using it to saw into a steak or, you know, cut up your pizza or whatever. That's the way you're going to hold your hook. Now, this is the way I hold my hook, is the knife grip. And yeah, so it's going to be the same if you're left or right-handed. And what I'd say for you to do is to simply just pick up your crochet hook. And however you hold it, just without thinking about it, that's the way you're going to hold your crochet hook. The second grip is called the pencil grip, and it is basically going to be how you hold a pencil or a pen or whatever writing utensil that you use. So for me, it's going to be like this because this is typically how I hold my pencil or my pen. I really don't like this grip that much because I think it's harder on my wrist and my fingers, but try out both ways while you're starting out and see what is comfortable to you. Very similar, but kind of different. Anyways, yeah, just practice picking up your hook, whatever feels more comfortable to you. Start with that. So now that we know how to kind of hold our hook, we're going to learn how to hold our yarn. But before we even learn how to hold our yarn, we're going to have to learn the most crucial thing in crochet, and that is the slip knot. So the slip knot, you are typically not going to see the slip knot mentioned in any pattern because it is assumed that you know that in order to start a chain, you have to do a slip knot. So let's not overcomplicate the slip knot. There are several different ways to make a slip knot, and some of them are more complicated than others. The way I like to do a slip knot is just like this. I just use my hands, and what I do is I create a little loop with my yarn. So we have the working yarn, which is going off towards the ball, and we have the tail yarn, which you want to leave your tail about 4 to 6 inches for weaving. So now I'm just going to kind of pinch it and create like a loop. And what I like to do is I like to just put that loop around my index finger, and I hold the 2 strings, so the tail yarn and the working yarn, in my right hand. So this is what we have. And then all I do is I twist my left hand so that way the tail is over the working yarn. And then I put my thumb and my index finger in that little loop that we created. And I grab the working yarn, pinch it and pull through that loop and tighten. And that is a slip knot. And you know that you did a slip knot correctly if you can pull on the working yarn and it'll start to tighten. You can pull up on it and it'll loosen, but the tail yarn does nothing. You see, I'm pulling on it and it's not going anywhere. And there you go. See, it doesn't create a knot. So one more time with the way that I like to do it. Tail, working, it's wrapped around my index finger. Just grab it like this, twist, pull through the working yarn, just like that. So I'm going to show you another method of doing a slip knot, and that is using your crochet hook. So in order to do this one, you're going to do exactly the same thing that I did with my fingers, except we're going to use the crochet hook. So we're going to have our tail yarn off to the right, our working yarn to the left. We're going to create that little loop, and we're just going to put our crochet hook right there. And as you can see, the tail is going behind the hook. The working yarn is coming through to the front. And we're just going to kind of go like this. We're going to hold both of our yarns. We're going to twist around. So we twisted our yarn like this. So once again, twist, grab that tail yarn and hold it, and then we're going to pull our working thread through, and we're going to tighten that tail. So that is another way to do a slip knot. And as you can see, it does exactly the same thing. So one more time. Okay, so I want you to practice the slip knot a few times until you really get comfortable doing it and to where you can kind of just do it without thinking. Okay, so once you're comfortable with the slip knot and you have your loop on your hook, we are going to learn how to hold the yarn. So in order to hold the yarn, as you can see, I've already got my crochet hook in my hand in my favorite grip, and I have the loop on my hook, and then we have the working yarn going out towards the right. So the way I like to hold my yarn is the very basic way, where I just go under my working yarn with my index finger, and then I just put my pinky under the working yarn as well, just like this. So this is what it should look like from the top, and then if I turn my hand over, you should see the yarn right there. So this is a very, very simple way of holding your yarn. This is my favorite way. This is how I learned. So I just remember index finger under, and the working yarn is going over my index. Once again, my pinky under, and the working yarn is going over. So yeah, just practice that a few times. Until you get comfortable doing that. As you progress in your crochet journey, you'll find different ways to hold your yarn, but for now, just hold it like this, just so you kind of understand how it works. So this hand here that's holding the yarn is going to be your tensioner, and this is what's going to put tension on your working yarn as you're working. So as you can see here how I just kind of turned my hand and placed my middle finger where the slip knot is and my thumb. So this is how we're going to start out holding our yarn and our hook. So we're going to use both of our hands pretty much. So working a chain stitch. First of all, we're just going to learn how to work it, and we're not going to worry about counting. So first step is to make sure that the hook is facing you like this. And then we're going to yarn over. So yarn over hook. As you saw, I went in front of my working yarn, and then I swooped it up and over. And now we're just going to pull that yarn through our loop, and that is one chain made. So we're going to move up. So what I like to do is I kind of like grab the loop with my other hand and scooch up my fingers and pinch below there. That kind of helps keep your tension. Once again, yarn over hook, pull through. That's 2. Yarn over hook, pull through, 3. Yarn over hook, pull through, 4. Okay, and I just want you to practice that over and over again. Just make a chain as long as you want until you are absolutely comfortable with the motions, and then you can just keep working up and up and up and up and up and up. And just keep going until you have consistent tension. As you can see here, this chain here is really big, and then the rest of them are kind of similar. That was the one that slipped off my hook. But this is what your chain should look like. If it's looking kind of wonky and your tension's everywhere and you got super huge ones and really, really tight ones, and really just focus on your tension. So you want to have a consistent tension. And this is something really that you can't explain. It's more something that you feel. And typically what I see a lot of beginners doing is their tension on their yarn is really loose. So like this part right here is really loose and they're struggling to keep tension. So what you want to do, if you find yourself drifting further and further away from your project, what I like to do is I just keep my hand here and I use this like a drawstring and I just pull it tight and it'll move everything closer. And then that way you can slowly move out, just like that. And you see how I periodically get closer and closer to the work, but I kind of lift up my index finger and put a little bit more tension on there. But if I find myself getting too close, I'll once again do that. And this is a good way to practice your tension. So just make a really, really super long chain. And if you feel like, okay, let's go ahead and fasten that off. Fasten off is just, you know, cutting your yarn. So I'm going to cut my yarn. And I'm just going to pull that thread through, tighten it up, and just take a look at your chain here and see if it's consistent. Now you see these are really kind of big. They're not consistent with these down here. And then it gets tight and then it gets loose. That's how you know you got to keep practicing. So I'm going to chain up a few and we're going to examine, we're going to go through the anatomy of a chain. Okay, so here is our chain. If you notice that when we look at the front, I'm going to call this the front of the chain. It looks like little V's. So you can see those little V's right there. So these little V's is going to be an indication of your count. So if we kind of cover up the rest of them, we can see there's a V here, a V here, here, and here. So that was what, 4? 1, 2, 3, 4 chains. Now if we flip it over to the other side, you'll see the other side of the chain, and they look like little bumps here. And typically this is where you will be working into if you are working a stitch. So single crochets would go into that little bumpy. And this is another way to count your stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So once again, this is the side view and this is the back of your chain. Here is the front. This is the way I typically like to look at my chains, is from the side, because it's more defined. You can see that bumpy right there. And same with this. I like to look at it just like this because it's easier to see. Now, if we look at this straight on, it's a little more difficult to determine whether or not this is the front or the back. But, you know, as you progress on into your crochet journey, you'll be able to identify this fairly easily as you move on. So as you're working the chains up, practice counting your stitches, practice looking at them, checking your tension. This is a good way to gauge your tension of your yarn because you can really see the differences in your tension in the chain. Another little tidbit to think about is when you are doing a chain, you want to make sure that it's loose enough to where you can work through your yarn and your hook. So typically what I like to do is I like to leave a tiny little gap right below the hook so that way it can pass right through. So just like that. You see? But for now, just work up your chains, practice keeping good tension. You just got to remember that you want to be able to work into the opposite side of your chain because this is where we're going to be working our next stitch. So in the next video, we're going to be working on a single crochet stitch. We're also going to go over chaining and then counting your rows and identifying a single crochet stitch. So I hope this was informative and it taught you something. Let me know in the comments down below if you are having any trouble or if you need any other clarifications. I will definitely try to answer any of your questions. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Happy crocheting, happy crafting. Bye.